Welcome to this exploration of combat in the Battalion Combat series of games. When I showed my overview of why I think BCS is such a great game system, my friends were like, yeah, Dickie, this is really good, but you didn't mention this and you didn't mention that. These next series of videos are designed to unpack some of the core mechanisms. They're not a tutorial, but if you've read the rules and they've kind of sunk in a bit, but you're still a bit fuzzy about what to do with them, this is for you. Well, and for me, because I need the reminder too. So I'm going to look at combat against these 5 great games, still waiting for Aracore, but must be coming soon, and take you through 12 different nuances or 12 different lenses, different ways of looking at combat so that you can make quicker, easier rule of thumb decisions about what to do whilst you're playing the games. First of all, we're going to go through the different types of combat. Usually in a game, there's probably 2, attacks and overruns. In BCS, there are 6. And those 6 are very different. We'll then have a little look at what the likely effect is if you just throw a 7. We'll then see what kind of difference mods makes to those attacks. Spoiler alert, a lot. And then we're going to look at the results using that rule of 7 and see how they need to be modified. Then we'll consider when to use what type of combat, where and when, and have a look at what kind of target would be best attacked in what sort of way. And then we'll look at the combat capabilities of, first of all, assault capable units, aka infantry, and then we'll cover the same but for armor, AV units. We'll then have a quick look at the 2 great charts included in the game, the unit capabilities and the unit skills and vulnerabilities charts, which are super helpful aid memoirs. And then we're going to bring it all together into thinking about how do we orchestrate this combat for the formation. Remember, this isn't about min-maxing individual counters, individual battalions. And then looking at that in theory, terms and conditions apply. It's not a perfect example. There are many, many different ways in which this game can be played. Otherwise, it would be an extraordinarily dull game, and it's certainly not that. So combat types. There are 6 different combat types. We'll start off with engagements, and there are 2 types of engagements. First of all, an engagement against an AV, aka a tank battle. This is next. There is the second type of engagement, or engagement versus support, which is against the anti-tank defenses. That can be, as in this case, an anti-tank gun or an assault gun put into support, or indeed medium tanks or indeed heavy tanks put into support as well. The third type of combat is one of the 2 types of barrage, attack by fire versus non-AV, tank versus infantry. Basically, your tanks roll up and shoot at your infantry. You can't do this against other tanks because that would be a tank battle. The second type of barrage involves artillery or indeed aircraft. They're essentially the same, except that aircraft don't have to be assigned to a formation, whereas artillery does. And this is just shooting at anyone, really. Fifthly, there is the first of the 2 types of assault, a shock attack. This is where mechanized units, AV units, actually units with attack with a red movement, tank and mechanized, have a go at infantry and then can do it again and keep on moving, and then if necessary other mechanized units can come and do the same. You might want to call it an overrun, but that's not what the game calls it. And then lastly, there's a straightforward regular attack where infantry attacks anybody. Both of these types of attack can be assisted by a suppression barrage. That's where you can think of it as a short, sharp artillery or air attack that keeps the heads of the defenders down, giving the attacker a bonus. The suppression is more effective in a regular attack because in a shock attack it's more off the cuff. Or you can do a destruction barrage. In a destruction barrage, up to 3 artillery can do a prolonged barrage that's aimed to wear down the enemy, cause step losses before the attack goes in. So 6 types of attack, all with different capabilities. Let's have a little look at what is the likely pain or gain if you throw a 7 and you're just at even, or no mods involved. So first of all, we have an engagement versus an AV unit. Now, you must engage, and if you are at evens, then you are most likely to both take a step loss. You need to have at least +2 mods to avoid taking a step loss, which is just a handy thing to bear in mind. So here, these Hungarian tanks would be making a very foolish attack against this Russian mechanized brigade. The second type of combat is the engagement versus support, and here, first of all, you can engage. It's usually optional. Most commonly you do. And if you're at evens, then you'll probably drop the support. In fact, even if you're -1, you will drop the support and you won't have any ill effect. Attack by fire against non-AV is a no-risk thing. You're basically shooting. They can't shoot back. And there's an increasing chance of you causing a step loss depending upon how vulnerable their location is. Likewise, a barrage with artillery or air is equally no risk, and the chances of causing casualties are higher. The shock attack, which allows multiple attacks, is at evens likely to cause an attacker loses 1 step, a defender retreats 3 hexes, and you get a traffic result in that hex, which is also an attacker loses 1 step, a defender loses 1 step if they're in prepared defense, or indeed if they're in key terrain. Unless you've got a +2 mod, so a bit like the engagement against tanks. You don't just willy-nilly dive in with a shock attack. Shock attacks are really designed for units that are quite weak or quite vulnerable or out in the open and misplaced. A regular attack against anything, you can only do 1 regular attack, or more accurately, a defending unit can only be attacked once by anybody in a turn. And again, the likely result is you take a step loss and they are forced to retreat 3 on a 7 and you get a traffic result. This is not super brilliant. It's, it's expensive. I mean, if you need to wheedle somebody out, it's fair enough. And again, if you're in prepared defense or indeed key terrain, then you lose a step, they lose a step, and they don't retreat. So as you can see, you need in 3 of these to have at least a +2 mod to make them a safe combat to engage in. So where are you going to get these mods from? Well, typical mods for the attacker is, well, first of all, you'd usually have an AR advantage. It's a brave person who brings an inferior unit and launches them into an attack against a superior unit. You often organize your formation to have a double objective, which gives you a +1. It's not always possible, but it certainly is a help, particularly where the defender has concentrated themselves and their double objective can cover several units at once. You ideally should either have a dual unit, which will give you a +1, or a red support, so like an assault gun or a tank in support. You will usually have a barrage to add suppression, which gives you a nice hefty +2, and you are usually going to have an assist from a second unit. All of those are possible, and you can get 2, 3, 4, 5 plus mods. The more the merrier. You may also have a couple of minuses where you're less likely to attack. So if your main supply route is blocked, probably not going to be in an attacking posture. If you're in prepared defense, that's also not an attacking posture. And rarely, if you need to attack off the map, then you get a nice boost. You usually get less mods for the defender. You're usually at an action rating disadvantage. You will usually have placed your unit in terrain if there's any terrain to be had. Often you may have put your unit into prepared defense, and ideally you'll have put them into both. And hopefully you'll have some support, or you might be a dual unit, although often the first action from an enemy is to beetle up with some armor and drop your support. You may get bonus from a hex side, such as a big river. You may be in a city or an urban hex. You might put 2 units together. This is risky because it risks doubling the effect of barrages. You might be in a very compromised situation and have to have more than 2 units defending in a hex. That's a bad idea. This is a very different game from most games where just stacking things automatically makes the defense better. In this game, there's a recognition that just cramming units into a hex makes for a denser target environment, which is a bad thing, and probably jumbles up the units, which is also potentially a bad thing. The exception is when you are fighting in major cities, in urban hexes. You might be a red hard AV unit, aka medium tank, out in the open. That would be good for you as a defender. You might have the same units in an urban environment, which would be extraordinarily bad. Knowing where you're roughly going to get your mods from just helps you quickly assemble in your mind what kind of boosts you're going to give your units in their attacks. The results of those boosts are substantial. Here we are, we're assuming a good old 7 die roll, 58% chance, so slightly more likely than unlikely, in a regular attack against some infantry. If you have 0 mods, as I said earlier, and you roll a 7, what's going to happen is you are going to take a step loss, and the defender is going to have to retreat 3 hexes, and there's going to be a traffic result in that hex that you advance into, which is not great. It's, you don't want to make a lifetime habit out of this. It's going to wear down the resilience of your units pretty quickly. You need the boosts. Boosting 1 doesn't make any difference. Giving yourself 2 mods will convert this into a defender retreat back to the HQ refuge. It'll still give you traffic, but it makes it into a no-risk attack. +3 is likewise. +4 takes it up another level. A D1 result for the enemy. They lose a step and they retreat to the refuge, and there's no traffic. You can just carry on with other units. This is a really free-flowing opening through the enemy lines. +2, +4 are keys to having a risk-free attack and a breakthrough attack. Now, this is when you are not in prepared defense or in key terrain. This is when you are, and it changes it because there's no retreat in prepared defense or key terrain until you get to +4. Everything else is attrition. You lose 1, they lose 1. Bit of a grind, something to be avoided. There is a final one. If you can get to +6 in your mods, then you move to the defender taking 2 step losses. Might be a bit of an overkill. If you're getting to +6, then you might pull back, for example, the artillery in order to use it in an attack somewhere else. That's how to quickly think about how much effort am I putting into this attack and what do I need to do to make it either safe, +2, or a breakthrough, +4, or a pretty crushing breakthrough, +6. Next is what to do, where and when. You'd do an engagement, you'd rush your tanks up against another enemy tank or dual mechanized unit where you really just need to attack them. You need to engage them, you need to attrit them, potentially you need to make them retreat. You can't avoid it, you can't run and hide. Tanks, attack, tank. Engagement versus support, well, you'd almost always want to do this if you can, because it softens up your enemy before a regular attack goes in, denying them a bonus. An attack by fire barrage, this is super helpful if you're going to do as your second action a shock attack, because it provides a bonus to your shock attack, and is something to do if you've got a spare fire event and frankly you've got nothing else to do. It's a no risk, no consequences type of attack. Likewise, a barrage that isn't linked to a regular attack or a shock attack is a kind of, well, they're here, we might as well use them. You might get lucky and finish off a unit, and that, at least you avoid wasting a perfectly good attack. Except attacking means you will take a roll on fatigue later. So there is a reason why you might hold back. If it was the only thing you were going to do, you probably wouldn't want to do it. Shock attack versus non-AV units, aka infantry. Really, this is like the bully attack. There's a 7-stone weakling in the sand and you want to come up and kick it in the face with your armor and then move on and achieve a wider objective. This is not an attack to do against an infantry unit that's in terrain, that's pretty beefy, that kind of stuff. Super useful occasionally when there's only a light front line, or when you've penetrated the front line and you only have some weak units behind. Perhaps, for example, you've had the enemy's had a unit that's had to retreat. It flips over from its deployed side to its move side where it's weaker. It may even be unprepared, which means it has no combat value. Well, you just zoom straight in there. And then finally, the regular attack against anybody. So you use this to force units to retreat if they're not in prepared defense and not in a key terrain, or you use it to attrit them if they are, or you use it to destroy them if they are already weakened with these big destruction barrages. Different types of attack for different kinds of use. Which ones to use when? Here's an estimation, right? This is not gospel. So if you have an infantry unit, i.e. an assault capable unit, and you come across a 1 or 2 step unit, and you've got the artillery for a destruction barrage, well, particularly if, say, you're Americans and you're always crazy with artillery, then, that's absolutely the optimum play. Do the destruction barrage. You may just completely wipe it out, and you don't even have to do the regular attack. You just advance after combat, or you may get a 1 result if it's a 2-step unit, and then with the regular attack, with sufficient mods, you'll take another step and eliminate it. And the aim is just to destroy it. 2-step units are really quite vulnerable in the game and well worth during the reinforcement phase of beefing them up to 3 steps. If the unit is 3 steps or more, it depends kind of what their defensive mod is and where they are. So if it's a straight even attack and they're in the open, a regular attack with 2 mods on your favour will potentially weaken them and send them into retreat. Weaken them in the sense that they are suddenly put into a less than optimal position. If they're getting a +1 defensive modifier, maybe they're in terrain or they're 2 in the open, then you can do the same, but this time you need +3 mods to overcome their defensive mods. Same result. If they're in prepared defense, or indeed if they are behind a river or in a city or in urban, then they're going to have 1 or 2 defensive mods. You're probably best off having a kind of a monster attack, 3 destruction and then a regular attack with +4 mods. That means you probably can't make many other attacks with your formation because you're concentrating all your best mods into this. And the aim is to attrit the defender in these places. It's a bit grindy. If your target is a hard red AV, aka medium tank, that's in the open, they are going to have a +2 mod against you as infantry. Don't do it. If you can avoid it, go bring your armour up and have a pop at them instead. Or you've got to mount a pretty serious assault with a +4 mod in order to make them retreat. And then finally, if it's an AV unit, not standoff, in an urban, get stuck in. They shouldn't be there. For armour, AV units, if you're facing a 2-stepped armour unit and it's not in key terrain and not in prepared defence, then just go and engage it. If you can get a +2 mod, 2 engagements will probably destroy it. If you've got a 2-step or 1-step assault capable unit, some infantry, and again, they're not in prepared defense or key terrain, then you have an option. You could either just barrel up and attack by fire. Even if you have no mod advantage, you might be able to take some step losses. Or you could engage them, engage the support if they have support, and then shock attack it at a +2 mod. Or indeed, you could, if they already don't have support, you could attack by fire and then shock attack with a +1 mod, because the shock attack gives you another mod, and you should be able to make it retreat. For stronger units, again in no great defensive posture, for armour, again, just go and engage them. If you get a +2 mod, you will weaken them and you will potentially force them to retreat, and then you may be able to advance and then do it a second time. For a bigger assault capable unit. Again, ideally you want to drop the support if there is any. If there isn't, you might have some attacks by fire. And then assist an assault capable unit doing irregular combat. And this is really to help the infantry make this unit retreat. If they are in prepared defense or they are in key terrain, then for armor, doesn't really make any difference other than you have to account for the +1 mod. So your engagements need really a +3 mod to make them risk-free and attrit your enemy. And your infantry, kind of ditto, but you'd almost invariably just drop support and assist. You may be able to attack by fire, you may be able to drop support on 2 adjacent units and help the infantry push back the enemy. So one of the things I find difficult is that different types of units have different attack capabilities and can do a different number of attacks. So let's keep it simple first of all. Infantry, whether leg-based or truck-based, they can do a regular attack that could be supported by a suppression or a destruction barrage, or indeed no barrage at all, or they can assist another infantry unit doing a regular attack. Mechanized units have a little bit more option because they can, in theory, do a shock attack twice and then do a regular attack, just like normal infantry, or assist. In practice, there aren't that many circumstances where they have an opportunity to do those shock attacks. Mainly you need open terrain, mainly you need enemy units that have already been disrupted by a previous attack and are in their move mode. I'm looking at North Africa really for this kind of thing. But when it happens, it's pretty dramatic because you can move, shock attack, and then regular attack as well. For armor units, first of all, if it's dual, i.e. it's a mechanized unit, it has some armor value and it's assault capable, well then it can shock attack twice, or attack by fire twice, or do an engagement twice, or 1 from 2 out of these 3. Lots and lots of choices. And then do a regular attack or assist a regular attack. So they can do 3 things, 2 from here, 1 from here. Tanks and breakthrough tanks, and indeed breakthrough assault guns, can nearly do the same. Again, they can do 2 out of these, 2 shocks, 2 attack by fires, 2 engagements, or 1 out of these 3. And then they can assist in a regular attack. I'm not mentioning they can all spot for barrage as well. And then assault guns and anti-tank guns can attack by fire and they can engage if they are not in support, i.e. they are real units on the map. And then likewise a assist. They can't do shock attacks, but again they have a reasonable number of choices. For me, this is one of the reasons why it takes a little bit of brain power, is to look at this tank mechanized core and go, right, well, I could shock attack with my AV value, I could regular attack, I could assist another attack, I can go up and do 2 out of any of these 3 things. What's the best permutation for the formation? Remember, it's not about min-maxing what this individual unit can do. That extent of choices is quite hard to keep in your brain, and so luckily the game designers have included this very helpful chart on different types of units doing different types of things and which ones can do what. I'd point out the easy to miss. These things require you to be within an objective zone. I haven't really discussed objective zones. That's really part of the next video, which is about command and control and supply. But objective zones are used by a formation to organize 1 serious attack or 2 less serious attacks, or by reconnaissance if they're able to identify an additional attack objective. So they have to be within 2 hexes of an objective to do a regular attack or assist or a shock attack or an attack by fire, not for engagement. And then these things, the shock attack, the attack by fire and the engagement, require fire events. Units are allowed a maximum of 2, except for infantry, and it's added here reconnaissance as an additional fire event. As well as the combat capabilities chart, there's the unit skills and vulnerabilities chart, which is similar but more detailed it goes into attack capable unit with no support, whereas before it just talks about an attack capable unit. And it tells you if there's a plus, so an attack capable unit with a red AV support gives you a mod. I prefer this chart, the extra nuancing, although it doesn't include this. Does this have to be within an objective zone, and is this required in a fire event? But otherwise, this is a fuller table. Both very, very handy. So this is getting a little bit longer than I intended, so I'm just going to pause at this point. This part one, as it's turned out to be, has been the more theoretical part. Join me in part two to have a look at what this really looks like in practice. Thanks for watching and stay safe.